You know, sometimes fantasy football is just pain. Let's talk about it. Welcome back, End Game community. It's Chris, and today we're going to talk about some players who didn't meet expectations here in Week 12 and maybe haven't been meeting expectations the whole season or recently. And I'm going to let you know, should you or should you not be panicking on these players? Let's get into it. And let's start as we do at the running back position, and we have to start with Dameon Pierce. What has happened to Dameon Pierce? For most of the season, it looked like this guy was a front runner for Offensive Rookie of the Year, was leading all rookies in rushing, looked tremendous week after week in a bad Houston Texans offense, running for yards after contact, breaking tackles, putting up yards, doing whatever he could in pretty much the worst possible situation. But man, have things turned the last 2 weeks. Over the last 2 games, Dameon Pierce has 15 carries for 16 yards. No, that is not a mistake. 15 carries, 16 yards. That is barely 1 yard per carry. And look, the Texans aren't doing him any favor by getting blown out in games and just giving him negative game script, because this isn't a guy who's going to catch a ton of passes. And for whatever reason, the Texans have decided that Davis Mills is bad, but we're going to go to Kyle Allen, who's even worse. The offense was worse today against the Dolphins without Davis Mills. I don't know what you do with Dameon Pierce. In week 13 here, he gets a great matchup with Cleveland, but can you really start him? I don't know. I mean, I feel like you have to because the matchup is so good, but man, I would be terrified having Dameon Pierce in my lineup, even in a great matchup like Cleveland. So no doubt here, I don't know if he's hitting the rookie wall. I don't know if they gave him too much work early in the season and now he's banged up. I'm not sure, but no doubt about it, panic level has to be sky high for Dameon Pierce at the moment. Now let's talk about another running back who has absolutely been terrible the last few weeks, and that is Alvin Kamara. And look, last season he showed signs that maybe he wasn't the same guy anymore. And a lot of people chalked it up to that knee injury, but he was bad before the knee injury last year. And look at him this year. He's been really bad on the ground. He's been saving his day, with some work in the passing game. But ever since that 3 touchdown game he had about 4 weeks ago, he's been horrible in fantasy, borderline unstartable in fantasy. He's only has 1 game of double-digit PPR points over the last 4. This guy used to be a PPR monster. Now you can't even start him. And in week 13, he's got to go play Tampa Bay. You want no part of that matchup at all versus Tampa Bay. Then in week 14, he's on the bye. So Alvin Kamara is not going to help you the next 2 weeks at all. Now on the plus side, he does get good matchups in the playoffs. But still, we can't view Alvin Kamara as anything more than an RB2. He's not going to win championships. He's not going to carry your fantasy team. He's the type of guy in the fantasy playoffs, in the good matchups, you can plug him in and feel, okay about him. But man, the days of Alvin Kamara being elite are over. Panic level high for Alvin Kamara. And then another stud running back who has not been a stud recently is Dalvin Cook. These last 2 weeks have been terrible if you've been rolling out Dalvin Cook. He's probably lost you your matchups because he's a guy you're counting on week in and week out to carry your team, and he just hasn't. On the plus side, though, these were 2 really tough matchups the last 2 weeks as far as for running backs go. These were brutal matchups. He's still getting the volume. He's still getting the work. And if you look at his remaining schedule, it's not like a smash schedule, but he has some really good matchups in there, and he doesn't really have any more matchups that should completely terrify you or scare you away. So I still think Dalvin Cook is going to be solid rest of the season. Low end RB1, high end RB2, somewhere in that 10 to 14-ish range every week with some decent upside. So I can't be too panicked about Dalvin Cook because, again, the usage is there. It's not like he looks terrible running the ball. He actually looks pretty good. We saw him rip off that long run a few weeks ago. So I'm going to put the panic level low on Dalvin Cook. And then right when we thought Tony Pollard was coming to win leagues, Ezekiel Elliott came back. Come on, man. Really, Zeke? And look, I get it. It's Thanksgiving. You're excited. You got your turkey. You're ready to see Pollard smash. And instead, you got to watch dusty old Zeke rip off long runs and score touchdowns. But it's going to be okay for Tony Pollard because, yes, he had a bad game. It happens. But he's still got 18 carries and 2 targets. That's 20 touches. That is elite level volume. Unfortunately, he just couldn't do much with it in this game for whatever reason. It wasn't like the matchup was bad. It just didn't work out for him. games like this happen, but as long as he's going to continue to get this usage in this offense with his ability and his explosiveness, he's still going to be good. Obviously, it would be better if Zeke wasn't there, but Zeke's never going away. We should know that by now. You know, he's going to be there to take carries, steal goal line work. So we can't treat Pollard as, an every week must start running back. He's back to more of that kind of like RB2 with upside type of guy, but still, nobody drafted Pollard to be, their week winning type running back week after week. So I'm going to also put the panic level low for Tony Pollard. And then finally, is it just time to drop Cordarrelle Patterson? Like, what are we really hoping for from Cordarrelle Patterson? I mean, last week he saved his day with a kickoff return touchdown. This week, I don't know, he had an okay game, but the problem here for Cordarrelle Patterson is he's not getting the usage you need to be fantasy viable, especially in an offense like Atlanta. He had the same amount of carries, 11, as Tyler Algier today. Now, on the plus side, he did catch a couple passes, which we hadn't been seeing from him recently, but still, in this offense, with the way he's being used, splitting with Tyler Algier, there's just no real upside here for Cordarrelle Patterson. He's 100% touchdown dependent at this point. And we got some questions, in our reaction, video. Can I drop him for this guy? Can I drop him for this guy? And I would say yes. I'm not saying Cordarrelle Patterson is a guy you have to drop, but if there's somebody really good on your waiver wire with more potential upside, I definitely think you can drop Cordarrelle Patterson for that player. So panic level definitely has to be high on Cordarrelle Patterson. All right, let's move on to wide receiver, and we got to start with Debo. And look, I've been talking a lot about how Debo cannot be considered a stud wide receiver anymore, and no one's been listening to me. And I mentioned it if you watched our reaction video. Sometimes I'll go out and I'll look at rankings for other sites, other places, ESPN, Yahoo, whatever, and every single one of them has Debo ranked like wide receiver 10, wide receiver 12. Like, he's just a stud, forget about it wide receiver. He's not. He's had 3 nice games this year where he scored 20 points, and 16 points. Outside of that, he's been terrible. Absolutely terrible. I think he's only reached 14 points once, maybe never. He's had like 3 games with single-digit fantasy points. If you take away that game against Arizona in week 11, and look, Arizona's a terrible defense, he's had back-to-back 7-point games. He's just not involved enough this year because Brandon Ayuk is healthy and looks good. George Kittle is healthy and is good. And now they have Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield. So, look, I'm not saying you have to bench Debo, but Debo to me now is just more like a wide receiver 3. If you need him, you can start him. He's certainly got some upside, but he's not a guy you should feel like you have to put in your lineup anymore. But still, like, I don't want to put panic level high here because he's still in a good offense and he's still involved. So I'm going to go medium on Debo. Just understand he's just a wide receiver 3 rest of the season. And then another stud wide receiver who has not delivered lately is Mike Evans. And it's really strange to me about Mike Evans because if you see like in this game, like in week 12 here, Chris Godwin and even Julio Jones, they're getting these short routes, the in routes, the easier throws. And Mike Evans has just become this vertical guy. That's all the Buccaneers use him as in this offense. Now, he did have 9 targets, which is great, but he only caught 2 of them. And a lot of throws Tom Brady makes to him just aren't accurate. They're not really where he can catch them because, again, he's just running vertical. And Tom Brady is still a good NFL quarterback, but he doesn't look like, to me, the same guy that we've seen in the last couple of years as far as the accuracy, the arm strength, and all of that. So, again, I don't want to put the panic level high for Mike Evans because we know what he can do on any given week, right? He can catch 2 huge touchdowns and just go off and win your week. But I definitely think there is some concern here that maybe Tom Brady can't support a guy like Mike Evans anymore. So again, like Debo, I'm going to put the panic level medium, but next week, this could be changing based on what happens with Mike Evans. And then, a lot of people were talking like, hey, Taylor Heinicke has saved Terry McLaurin this year. As if 2021 never happened where Taylor Heinicke ruined Terry McLaurin. What have we seen in the last 2 weeks? Taylor Heinicke is ruining Terry McLaurin again. Back-to-back 9-point games. And look, 2 weeks ago, maybe you could excuse it. It was an okay matchup. But this was Atlanta in week 12. Atlanta. You should destroy Atlanta. This is what we saw last year from Terry McLaurin and Taylor Heinicke. Ups and downs. Lots of downs, though. And I think people just kind of let it slide because he had 3 kind of up games in a row, and people were like, it's fixed. Taylor Heinicke fixed it. No, this is still Taylor Heinicke. He's still a terrible QB. yes, Terry McLaurin, I'm sure will still have a game or two down the stretch here where he goes off, but he's also going to have games like this because he's got Taylor Heinicke. So again, I can't put the panic level high here because, again, like he will have some nice games. I'm going to also do panic level medium here, but look, the Taylor Heinicke honeymoon may be over. And then we got to talk about Gabe Davis because, we've always said, like, Gabe Davis is one of those guys, he's so hard to bench because he has that week winning upside. And he was supposed to realize that week winning upside on Thanksgiving Day against the Lions. But you know who got that week winning upside instead? Isaiah McKenzie? What? Gabe Davis kind of disappeared in this game. And he really has not been great for a while now. And really only has had like a few big games this year. And here's the real problem for Gabe Davis now. That was his last smash matchup. He gets a decent matchup against Miami in week 15, but that is it. Outside of that, we're talking all tough matchups, New England, just some of the toughest secondaries. You're not going to feel good starting Gabe Davis in those games. Could he go off in them? Of course. He can always catch a long touchdown, but look, you feel better about him in better matchups where he can get open deep and catch the ball. So I don't know. I just don't see a path for Gabe Davis being startable rest of the season, again, outside of that Miami matchup. So I think at this point, if you have Gabe Davis, I don't know what you're expecting. So I got to put the panic level high on Gabe Davis. It's just hard to see him, becoming that guy that he was drafted, that people wanted him to be. Maybe he booms once or twice more, but that's probably it at best. So panic level high on Gabe Davis. And then finally, I'm just going to come right out and say, you can drop Tyler Boyd. What is going on with Tyler Boyd? He just had 2 smash matchups, both without Ja'Marr Chase, and did nothing in either game. 5 total PPR points, I think, or 6 total PPR points? I don't know what's going on with Tyler Boyd. Obviously, T. Higgins is a stud. He's been going off. But Tyler Boyd has just disappeared in 2 great spots. If he's not going to get it done in these 2 matchups without Ja'Marr Chase, what is he going to do next week when Ja'Marr Chase more than likely comes back? Probably nothing. So, Patterson, I said you can drop him if there's somebody good to grab off waiver wire. Tyler Boyd, you can completely drop him in pretty much any format outside of really deep leagues. Panic level, it's sky high here because, honestly, Tyler Boyd, what are we even expecting from Tyler Boyd at this point? Drop Tyler Boyd, panic level high. All right, then I got a couple of tight ends for you, and of course I got to start with Mark Andrews. Where is Mark Andrews? Has anybody seen Mark Andrews? I would love to have Mark Andrews back. My fantasy teams would love to have Mark Andrews back. He's been good, of course, by tight end standards, right? He's been good, but this isn't what we want from Mark Andrews. We don't want good, we want great, and he hasn't been great the last 2 weeks, and this Ravens offense hasn't been great the last 2 weeks. But the worst part was here in week 12, Oliver, not even the backup tight end, the backup tight end to Isaiah Likely, the 3rd string tight end, went off, and Mark Andrews did very little. Now, he did drop a touchdown that would have, made a much better day today. He's still getting targeted. I do think better days are ahead for Mark Andrews. I can't put the panic level any higher than low here. It's Mark Andrews. He's a tight end. It's just the way it is. I think better days are ahead. But man, if this continues, may have to start increasing that panic level. And then finally, Cole Kmet. Last week, Justin Fields, he finally stopped scoring touchdowns, didn't do a whole lot. And then this week, didn't even have Justin Fields and did nothing. And here's the problem for Cole Kmet. I don't think we see Justin Fields next week, because why? Well, why put him out there if he's not 100% when you're obviously out of it and you're not playing for anything right now? You're not trying to win. We're not going to see Justin Fields until Justin Fields is absolutely 100% risk-free. And I don't think it's going to be next week. Maybe it'll be the week after, maybe the week after. But at that point, it doesn't matter. Cole Kmet, was terrible to start the season. Then he got red hot with Justin Fields and started catching a bunch of touchdowns. And now we're seeing him be terrible again because he's not catching touchdowns. And I think people got a little ahead of themselves with Cole Kmet saying, he's like a top five tight end just because he was scoring a lot of touchdowns. I don't see it. He's fine. He's one of those guys, especially if Justin Fields plays, you can start him, hope for a touchdown. But really, I think the hot streak, I think it's over for Cole Kmet. Going to put the panic level high here for Cole Kmet because this probably is who he really is. And he just went on a hot stretch of scoring touchdowns for a little bit there during a stretch. All right, now some players you should or should not be panicking on. What about who to pick up off the waiver wire, who to start, who to sit, who can boom? we got you covered. Everything you need to win in Week 13. Check out our Week 13 playlist right here.